was a dark, stormy morning, and all through the veldt, not a creature was stirring, not even a bushveld gerbil. And of course, for those of you familiar with our live safaris, you will know that that is blatantly untrue, because you never know what's been happening all through the night. It's our job to just find the little magical moments that have happened so we can show them to you. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to the Sunrise Safari. My name is Jamie. I have Liam on camera with me this morning. We also have Kirsten, Jerry and FC doing a wonderful job of telling us what to do, as well as filtering all of your questions through to us. Don't forget, as we are a live and interactive safari, you can send through comments and questions to us on hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or you can email them through to questions@WildEarth.tv. We are coming to you live from Djuma and Arathusa game reserves within the Sabi sands of the Greater Kruger National Park area of South Africa. Isn't that exciting? Our regular viewers will be happy to know that Mr. Henry has finally made his way on holiday. The fates attempted to conspire to keep him with us by locking him in his room this morning. But with prodigious use of a screwdriver, we were able to release him from his unofficial prison and send him off on his great escape. The nice thing about that is that it means you get a couple of days with the wonderful company of Mr. Stefan Winterboer. Now, we at Wild Earth are lucky enough to enjoy Steph's company for most of the week, but our viewers don't always get to see him, because he works quite a bit behind the scenes. But now you'll be able to enjoy the incredible gentlemanly company of Steph, who is out with Brian, wandering the wilds on foot. However, given the nature of our somewhat overcast and cool morning, might have to delay his departure ever so slightly. You can't go wandering around the bush in the dark. And as I said, it is cold, cloudy, with a hint of rain, which I may or may not be imagining. I hope I'm not. It is 21 degrees centigrade, which is 69 degrees Fahrenheit, for those of you in that part of the world. Positively chilly, positively wintry compared to the baking temperatures we've had recently. I'm wearing a jacket. I'm enjoying every moment of it. Right, now, I'm on my way to James's den. The Henry Den. That must be the Henry Den road. I have never been to the Henry Den. Let's go and explore. So I want to pop in there because for those of you who missed the sunset safari yesterday, there has been an interesting development. It appears, I'm going to put my spotlight down, it's starting to get light enough for me to see without it. It appears as though D1 and D2, the twins, the youngest twins at the Gallagher Shortcut Den, have moved to this den. So this will be my first exploration of new territory. Let's see if we can find them. Actually, so far, this road has been easier than the entrance to the Gallagher Shortcut Den. I hope I'm on the right road. I must be. Surely. Oh yes, Lucy, who's watching all the way in Indiana. Lucy was keeping an eye on the dam cameras for us. And for those of you unfamiliar with our dam cameras, oh, good morning Impala Chef. Let me turn off all my lights so that I don't blind you. Lucy heard a hyena whooping at 4:46 this morning. So did we actually, Lucy. Our camp is just around the corner from the dam camera. Where on earth am I going? Hello, Impala. Sorry, excuse me. Good morning. Don't mind me. Good morning, little ones. Hello. Well done for surviving the night. I don't say that lightly, actually, because this is the perfect hunting weather for predators. They can take full advantage of the lack of any kind of ambient light. And the wind robs the animals of their senses. You can hear the wind blowing. You can be sure that last night some hapless creature met its end in the jaws of a predator. Oops, I've forgotten how to grab trigger. Okay, let's continue to explore James's makeshift road. We're making our way towards the Mvubu Road, unofficially known as the Henry Den. I hope that's where we're going. Either way, we are traveling through the bush somewhere. Whenever we visit the hyena dens, we get fairly frequent questions about when hyenas, or when exactly sea hyenas move their den sites. And we had an answer in terms of Corky's movements from when we discovered her at the Philemon's Cutline Den a couple of weeks ago. She then moved to the Gallagher Shortcut Den. Good morning, everybody. My word. Meeting of great minds of the bush. And now Corky has moved the pups. Jamie. Cubs. Cubs, they're not pups. Once again. Hello, guys. Sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hyenas. Goodness me. Good morning. Hello, Munchkins. What are you up to? I don't want to get any closer. Let's just stop here. That was June that wandered away. And then one of the other sub-adults. Can't tell which one at the moment, given that it's currently covered in June. Sure. What a beautiful den site. There you go, a little bundle of brown fluff there. I wonder if November's moved as well, or been moved. What's she doing, Mischief? Coming to chew tires. I'm watching you. Thanks to VM, I've got eyes in the back of my head. I can see what you're up to. Look at those eyes. Total innocence. I would never do anything wrong. We know better. Notorious oil-capped thieves. Nope. Oh, obviously. Not as interesting. What is that? Is that a virtual reality rig? Is that interesting? Is that fascinating with all its flashing lights? That's a new thing, isn't it? Well, fairly new. Oh, exciting stuff. Fascinated. There you can see that intelligence. None of the other animals have reacted to the virtual reality rig. But these guys are distinctly not put out in any way, just curious. They want to know what's going on. I thought for a second that was pretty, that adult, but it's not. Just the double spots on the top of her back made me think it was. And hyenas also enjoying the cool weather. This is a wonderful den site, I really must say. It is such a beautiful position, and it's surrounded by all kinds of bush willows. It's picturesque. It's like they've moved to a bigger house almost. So James, you suggested that the movement was based on Corky. Corky, the famed scavenging hyena, was disgruntled that this den was getting so much attention, and thus decided to relocate her mischievous brood to this new den site. And I really like this den site. We might get some calling now. We're lucky. Now Charlotte, who is watching in Port Elizabeth. Charlotte, I do hope you guys are getting more rain than we are. Charlotte would like to know if the sub-adults at our hyena den have any particular function. For example, babysitting, or something along those lines. And the answer is not deliberately, really. They're not going to act as babysitters. They might act as playmates. But for the most part, the only real accidental function they might have is their senses are a bit more refined than those of the cubs. So they're an extra pair of eyes to keep a lookout and an eye out on the goings-on at the den. So if they dash for cover, the cubs might pick up on that behavior. Is that? No. I thought that was the hyena with the injured ear, but it's not. Although it does have a slightly floppy... No, just the way it was holding that ear. So Charlotte, not an intentional one. There's also a little bit of research being done now into the impact that they might have on cubs accidentally. Obviously, they're much bigger and much stronger than the cubs themselves, but they are very playful, which means they could possibly injure the cubs. And I told the story yesterday of the three-legged hyena on Baluli that the guys have been watching, and apparently that's November, isn't it? That is November. Oh, nip. Apparently this little cub grew up with only 3 legs, and it was quite strongly suspected that that injury had been inflicted by a sub-adult cub. It got a little bit too rough with it. It does look like November, doesn't it? It does to me, which means Pretty has moved here as well. November generally is a little bit more playful than the twins. A little extra month has given him extra courage, apparently. And if we're really lucky, we might even get to hear him call. Pile of cubs. Oof, Jamie. They're not pups, they're cubs.
Call them hubs.
Hubs. Pile of hubs. Hyena cubs. Pile of hubs. I like that. November trying to involve himself as much as possible. It's not really working. Kind of getting ignored. There we go. Managed to make himself known. Excessive use of very sharp cubby teeth. Yep. I want to play. So Brian, we've got a wonderful mixture of different ages at this den. And you were wondering how long the cubs will stay at the den before they start moving off on their own. And the answer is easily up to a year. They'll be around the den site. That being said, they start to explore and go off more and more at around 6 months or so of age. So we've seen June ranging further and further afield, and we saw it with the older ones as well. Who's calling? Someone's calling. I'm actually going to move forward now that the hyenas are not too close to my vehicle. Slightly different perspective, because I think the individual calling at the den is that female up there, which might be Corky. Yep, that looks like Corky to me, calling for her twins. No response so far. We've just attracted the attention of all the sub-adults in the den by moving slightly. They've all come to investigate us. Hello, gorgeous. You're quite beautiful. Look at that face. They have such an unfair reputation. All of that intelligence and curiosity. The play wrestling. Alice, you were wondering why hyenas always try to chew each other's ear off. And the answer is it's one of the most vulnerable places. It seems as though genital biting is against the... what you're doing? Hey. Mister? Why are you chewing? Is it okay there, Liam? Monster. Hey, what are you doing to my tires? I see you. I see you. Stop chewing them. Oh, you're so naughty. You are so naughty. In much the same way that my oil caps on my tires are vulnerable, so are their ears. Monster, stop it. Please stop chewing it. You can't take those. Steph will shout at me. Steph will shout at me. Wait, stop it. Stop chewing my bumper now. Hey. Just, I don't want to interfere in any way, obviously, but I cannot let them learn that chewing on my bumper or around my oil caps is acceptable behavior. Hyenas learn. They learn quickly. It's just about establishing that particular boundary. Yes, you naughty creature. So all I did there was tap my fingernail on the side of the car, and that behavior stopped. Mischief. So Alice, yes, much like my oil caps on my car, or any flapping pieces. There we go, here come the twins. Hyena ears are their most vulnerable. And genitals are also particularly vulnerable. You will have seen how they present them for the greeting ceremony. But that seems to be off limits for a fair fight. In the more savage ones between, for example, clans, then it might be something that they do. But they generally aim for ears and tails and bottoms. Debbie, I have actually seen hyena hunt before. Got across with one of the sub-adults there. And the two adults stepped into, by the looks of things, just send it packing. So that strategy that you saw right there is sort of something that partially, at least, answers Debbie's question. Quite hard to find a nice position at this den. And Debbie, yes, I have seen hyenas hunt. In fact, once on a sleep out in a big open clearing, I saw a clan of hyenas take down a zebra. And in fact, they're one of the most effective hunters out here, as I'm sure you know. They've got a very high success rate. And that's because rather than trying to sneak up on their prey, their strategy is similar to wild dogs. They chase by, or continue to chase and eventually exhaust the animal due to their incredible stamina. They don't overheat or use up or build up lactic acid in the same way that the big cats do. So their strategy is slightly different. They will chase down. They don't replace every few hundred meters with a fresh animal. It doesn't actually work that way. But what they will do is they'll spread out so that when the animal twists and turns and ducks in different directions, there's always a hyena there to meet it, and eventually they just exhaust the animal. And then they kill them in a very similar way to wild dogs. So there's none of the chokehold or strangulation that big cats employ. Instead, they just rip apart. I'm going to shift forward because the twins have come out the other side of the den. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine what this is going to be like in 4 months' time? When these cubs have become curious and courageous like June. They're going to be visiting den sites and having to have mirrors all around the car to stop them from chewing on loose pieces. 3 bundles of trouble. Now the question is, if those cubs have come out there, which female was calling at the entrance? Because that's definitely Corky. Come on girl, turn your head for me so I can see. Yep, that's Corky. Sub-adults coming to say hello and not welcomed by Corky. And the cub got very brave there with Mom's help. The twins still nervous of the sub-adults in a way that November is not. They want to play, but they're a bit more circumspect about it. They should be absolutely fine with their mother's watchful eye. She's decided it's bath time. Someone's calling again. When there's 8 hyenas wandering around, it's quite difficult to keep track of which one's which and which one's calling. I think it's that one on the left. When I first got here, I thought no, it's not. I thought I saw that big female that is June's mother with the scar across her back. Pretty sniffing Corky. And someone there is making submissive noises. Look at how Corky's cub's responding to that. Oh, most interest again. From what we've been able to see, Pretty is submissive to Corky. But this is pretty interesting to watch. That greeting ceremony has gone on for a very long time. Pretty sure those noises are coming from Corky. Can't can't see her face though, so I can't confirm. United in motherhood to chase another adult away from the cubs. And all they're really interested in is breakfast. I really like this den site. A combination of tambuti trees and bush willows makes for a very attractive den site. I'm going to stay a little bit longer since this is my first trip to this new den, but I believe that Steph would like to say his first good morning to you, so let's pop over to him.
Not the most appetizing of openings from Brian and myself this morning on the bushwalk, but it definitely leads us into the introduction of what I want to talk to you about today. Well, welcome everybody. This is myself, Steph Winterboer, on the walk for this morning, and since James has left us to go and leave, you are unstuck with me, lucky or unlucky, depending on how you want to look at it. But what we've done is Brian and I have walked into the Mulwati drainage line, and what was immediately apparent to us was this just lack of vegetation all around. What that does do though is it allows us to highlight certain things that are not as apparent when the foliage is just so thick and so engrossing. But what we did find here was where elephant have walked past this tree and have actually rubbed themselves on it, rubbed some mud off on themselves. And you know, it's always quite difficult to give you an idea of scale, or to give you an idea of how big these animals actually are. But this particular rubbing post is going to allow us to do just that. I stand 6 foot 1 inch tall, so you can imagine my 6 foot on this this tree is about here. And from where I am, this is where an elephant's belly is. And I know that because this is where the mud has been wiped off by that elephant. So elephant has walked past here, and its belly has been scraped between this part of the, hold on, my radio, this part of the tree and this part of the tree. And the reason why I did that was because we've got two trees standing next to one another right here, and this ellie came past and with its bulk squashed, had a bit of a scratch, and then carried on walking and left its mud telltale. So you can imagine me 6 foot 1 inch, and here we go, boom boom, belly. Here's the first sign of the mud we're getting. Brian comes around this side, you'll actually see here where the mud has been wiped off, and then there's a point that's been rubbed quite smooth, and then here the mud stops. Here right at the top there, the mud stops. So that was the elephant's belly. So to give you an idea of scale of exactly how big these ellies are. And this isn't even a very big elephant. Some of them will be a lot taller than this, but on average that would be the belly height of an elephant, not the shoulder. Alright, so we're going to carry on. We're on an elephant path actually, and I'm hoping not to bump into too many things in this thick bush, even though the cover is very open. I'm looking for some smaller things this morning. I actually absolutely would love to find you a lunar moth. It's a challenge that I set for myself at the beginning of this year. What we're standing in is a thicket of tambuti, and the lunar moth caterpillar eats tambuti leaves, which is why I've come here. But in all 17 years of my guiding, I've never managed to find one in its natural environment. I've always only just found them in log piles and stuck on the side of walls. I've never really found them in their natural environment, and I'm hoping that we can do that today. So we're going to carry on through this thicket. It's one of the rarest forest types that you get actually in the bush out here. It's tambuti thicket forest. And it's because the wood was so highly prized for its furniture abilities. I'm just going to move this out of the way for Brian so that he can get past. There you go. May look a bit weird with Brian dancing around me over here, but it's necessary. He's got a big aerial on his back. And although I'm trying my best to, here we go. And here is the first sign of our lunar moth. This is the pupae, or the cover at least anyway, cocoon, a better word, of the lunar moth. And I know that it's the cocoon of the lunar moth, A, because it's got this silvery, it almost looks like it's been sprayed with silver spray paint, and it's got these holes in. That's characteristic, and it's made of silk, a very, very coarse silver silk. This was last year's cocoon, not this year's cocoon. You can see something actually ate the larvae on the inside. So this one, and it's very common for pupae to be preyed upon, in particular by wasps. So wasps themselves are, they eat nectar, and they suck at the juices of fruit, but the wasp's larvae are carnivorous. And so what's happened is a lady wasp, has come and injected her egg into the pupae. It's then lived off of the pupae. Generally what they do is they don't kill it, they feed on all the soft tissue first and all the non-essential organs, and only when the pupae is ready to come out or emerge as a full-grown wasp will it eventually kill its host and then emerge as a wasp and carry on with its life cycle, obviously killing the lunar moth in the process. But there we go, have a look at that. Isn't it such a fantastic cocoon? Anyway, I want to show you the moth, and we're going to carry on. And while I think that Brian and I go through this thick bush, because it is getting a little bit thick over here, and what I don't want to do is be yakking while we walk through there, we're going to send you back through to Jamie, who's got some vocalization with those hyena she was with. We'll catch up in a bit.
Some interesting sounds happening here and some interesting goings on. Although oof, did you get into trouble? That one hyena's got a fresh injury on her hip. Love the sounds that you can hear at a hyena den. I'm not sure which hyena that is. So hyenas, spotted hyenas in particular, Corky's going to cork the den. That's her solution to whatever's going on there, is to sit on top. Look at her body language. Doesn't look terribly happy. Not sure who it is that's... I think that's Pretty next to her. I think. It's hard to tell. It's Pretty that's making all of that noise. But her cub is not in the den. Her cub is out, playing with one of the sub-adults. Maybe that's where she's on her way to now. She's very submissive, I think, Pretty. Okay. Interesting. And I think it was it Pretty that had that injury on her hip? Could have been from another hyena. Sometimes the dominance displays do become slightly aggressive, particularly when access to food is in question. And they do look fairly full-bellied, all of the hyenas at this den, so they could well have eaten last night, managed to find and scavenge a meal. Difficult to find a good position to watch all of the action at the same time. But we can still see the twins who have now settled down to suckle. And Brian, you wanted to know why the one hasn't killed the other, as spotted hyenas sometimes do. Brian, there's a lot of research going on to suggest that that might not be nearly as common as we originally thought. So spotted hyenas have become famous for siblicide. And the idea was that it was usually when there were two female cubs, and they would start immediately fighting for dominance within their own personal little family hierarchy. And because the females have such high levels of androgen and testosterone, they were usually the more aggressive. Whereas if it was a male and a female cub, or male and female cubs, they would automatically have an established hierarchy, so there wouldn't be as much conflict. And then male on male, so two male cubs, they were not as aggressive, so they didn't kill each other as often. Brian, there's a lot of evidence now to suggest that siblicide or canism is not actually as common as it was first thought to be. It does happen, I'm sure it does happen. It cannot be without recorded cases. But for example, with Pretty and her one cub, November, doesn't necessarily mean that November killed off a sibling. In fact, with young Pretty, it could be that because it was her first set of cubs, the first one actually died in the childbirth process, which for spotted hyenas, as you can imagine if you're familiar with their genital structure, is a particularly difficult process. What are you doing in the tree? Trapped itself. There's a sort of now a study that's suggesting that it's more often that an aunt that has killed one of the other cubs, an aunt or a sub-adult cousin, in an aggressive attack at a den site. There's the dark side to any animal's behavior, particularly predators. They border as I said, they do have a dark side, as does any predator. So essentially, that instinct to hunt and to kill can be triggered every now and again. And even though spotted hyenas are my favorite predator, you've got to be aware of that. And Sleepy, you were one... Oh, got cross with November there. Sleepy, you were wondering how common it is for spotted hyenas to attack humans. The answer is it's very, very uncommon. And hyenas are absolutely terrified of people. If I were to step out of the car now and start walking towards them in any kind of aggressive display, the adults would melt off into the bush as quickly as possible. Look at that ridiculous sub-adult tucked in the V of a tambuti tree. It's ridiculous. It's very silly. But, that being said, hyena attacks do happen, and they usually happen when somebody is sleeping outside or with an open door or in an open tent where the hyena comes to investigate. And a lot of the time it's just curiosity initially, where they go and they investigate. But of course, not having thumbs and not having fingers, the investigation sometimes takes the form of their jaws, and they usually investigate around the face because that's where they're sniffing. Very, very uncommon, and it's almost always 99.9% of the time it is people who've slept outside without any kind of watch, or they've left their doors open, or they're sleeping unguarded. Now, we always shut our doors at night. Even if it's really, really boiling hot, we make sure our doors are shut, just because you never know when a hyena is going to come and investigate. It's hugely, hugely uncommon. It hardly ever happens. I've been tracking with these guys before. I got out to follow a drag mark. I walked for about 2 kilometers with a curious hyena just following me. And if I turned and looked at it, then it would run away, and then it would come back and be curious. I've also pulled a hyena cub of about November's age out of a tree before. And that's a situation where an animal is thought to be at its most dangerous. So a female trying to protect its young. The mother was there. The cub had trapped itself. It was in a den similar to this kind of setup. And it had trapped itself in the V of a branch with its paw stuck like this, so it was dangling. And it couldn't get up against gravity, and the paw was slowly starting to swell and to lose feeling. So what we did was we jumped out and we chased the mother away a little bit, and then wrapped a jacket around the cub's head and pulled it out, and then left immediately as soon as possible. And although she stood there, she stayed, and she made noises of distress. She never made one move towards attacking us. So they're not vicious, savage man-eaters. Even at night, I would say. Look at those cubs, that one still trapped against the tree. Now, I love spending time at hyena dens as much as the next person, but I've just heard a report on the Game Drive channel that there's a possibility the wild dog came wandering onto Vuyatela sometime last night or early this morning, and I want to go and follow up there. So I'm going to leave our wonderful hyenas and look forward to many hours in the future spent with them. And while I negotiate my way out of the bush, let's head back over to Steph.
When I searched for the elusive lunar moth this morning, I've come to have a look at this grandfather of a tamboti tree, and I'm just going to give this guy a little bit of a hug. You know, it's like hugging my grandfather or my grandmother. I enjoy doing them. These trees are hundreds of years old. A tree this size is probably in the region of 300 or 400 years old. Can you imagine what this tree's seen in its lifetime? And I enjoy spending some close time with these guys, these giants, these grandfathers or grandmothers of the bush. They've got so much history, and you know, it's nice to just soak it up. But what caught our eye was not only wanting to come look here for a lunar moth, but at the top over here we've got an orchid. It's a youngster that has taken flower, or taken root at least, in this tree. But for those of you who follow the show quite religiously, you'll know that the tamboti tree is quite toxic. They have a very strong, almost caustic sap, and it's actually would be too caustic for an orchid to live on if the orchid was gaining sustenance from the tree. But these orchids actually just use the tree as support. They don't derive anything from the tree. It's not a parasitic plant. It's I think a xerophytic plant, if my terminology is correct. And what it basically does is just uses the tree for some height, for some elevation through the forest canopy, so it can get the sunlight that it needs to metabolize life. So that's a youngster. By young, I mean he is probably 0 to 5 years old. I'm not that good at aging orchids. It's a leopard orchid, only orchid that we find in this part of the world. Actually, I lie. There are more orchids, but not in the low veld. There are on the escarpment, in the forests of the escarpment. A few more, but the leopard orchid is the only one that's managed to find itself a foothold in these very warm valleys. And I know that it's 0 to 5 years old because they can get quite bulbous. At the bottom of that orchid, they can get quite amorphous, a mass of vegetable matter. Their roots basically become big like this, and they catch all the dust and everything, and from there it gets all its nutrients. But no sign of any lunar moth from where we are, so we're going to carry on going. Myself and Brian are having an absolutely fantastic morning, actually, just busy chatting about stuff. I'm just going to move some of these thorn sticks out the way for Brian. As you can see from the bush around us, it is just absolutely denuded of vegetation. There's actually no grass cover whatsoever. And traditionally, I'll be walking through here knee-high in grass. Can you believe it? Desiree, that's quite a worrying comment that you gave me, that I hope you don't caress my grandparents that I was caressing the tree. I don't quite know how to answer that, Desiree. Like, you know, I'm actually going to refrain from answering that question. Like, I don't caress my grandparents, but I do like to feel my grandmother's skin on her elbows and, you know, on her hairs. But Brian's going, cut that, I'm digging myself a hole, so I'm going to stop. But no, thanks very much for that comment, before I dig myself too deep into another one. But as I was mentioning, what we should be doing this time of the year is walking knee height in grass, like this. We actually wouldn't be able to walk through this. Exactly the height that you are now, we should be in grass. It'll give you an idea of just how dry it is over here. Now, the drought has been sort of an eternal topic over the last couple of game drives that I've been watching from the comfort of the air-conditioned final control. And I must be honest with you, it's not until you really get out here that you start to feel how dry it is. Once again though, just to reiterate the fact, drought, the same as floods, the same as fire, the same as disease in actual fact, is all part of the normal cycle of things, and it's not something that we need to get ourselves too concerned about. The strongest survive, and even in, let's say, the most hardcore of droughts and the most hardcore of floods, there is a piece of every single animal population that survives through to the next generation. So not to worry, it's not too much of a story. It's just shocking to see, to be quite honest. Alrighty, let's carry on over here. See if I can get one of these. This is one of the jasmines that we have here. The river jasmine, or the Jasmine fluminense. Jasminum fluminense is how I like to pronounce it. And you can see it's dried up a little bit, but Alright, while Brian is on that, the flowers have dried out a little bit and don't actually smell like anything at the moment, which is quite bizarre. But Sarah in Ohio has, hi Sarah, has actually asked me what's the biggest lunar moth that I've ever seen. Well Sarah, I caught one just the other day, just before Christmas. I caught one in the wood pile at the back of Djuma's camp, and it's probably about as big as my hand. I don't know how to give you a size thing. I haven't got the world's biggest hands, but probably about as big as my hand. The body with the wings will be about here, with the wings about that spread, and then they got tail streamers about this big. So I would say an average man-sized hand, and from the base of the palm to the top of the middle finger would give you an idea of what the biggest one, and then the wingspan just slightly wider than what my hand is. Will give you an idea of how big the biggest lunar moth is I've seen. And they've all tended to be the same size. I haven't seen a grading in sizes of the ones I've caught, at least. They all tend to come out fully formed and around about the same size. Alrighty. Stepped on a thorn. Jane, I didn't quite catch your question over there. I know you were asking me about a lunar moth and a praying mantis. I had a bit of static coming through my ear. Do you find the lunar moth praying mantis here? I'm going to say that you do get some praying mantises that look like lunar moths. You get these leaf-like praying mantises and these flower-like praying mantises that have the most wonderfully shaped abdomens, wings, legs, appendages all over them, even the most wonderfully shaped heads, and they can resemble flowers and leaves. Have I seen a lunar moth praying mantis? No, I haven't seen a green one with the silver and brown stripes on that you are referring to. I don't know if it even is a type of praying mantis you get. Feel free, please, to let me know if it is. I haven't seen one, but then again, I haven't seen nearly everything out here, and yeah, it could quite well be. Right, now, Brian and I need to decide how we're going to get through here, and I think let's walk over the top here, Brian. Pick the path of least resistance for Brian's 6.5 foot tall body, plus the 3.5 million feet tall aerial that he's carrying around. And what we're doing is, this is the first time that Brian and I have actually been in this area for a walk. I've never walked this part of the reserve, can you believe? Having been here for almost a year already, there's still a lot of places here that I have no idea what they look like inside. And today we decided to come here. This is a drainage line that we're following. For those of you who watch the show religiously, this depression that Brian is showing you at the moment is the drainage line that runs parallel to the fire break road on and crosses at Gari, or Gari, what's it, Gari Main, eh? Gari Main, runs parallel to Gari Main, a place where we see a lot of leopard and a lot of elephant. Now, this is a jackalberry tree, and I always like looking in the bark of these things. I am going to be spat in the face by a Mozambican spitting cobra at some point in my career because of my fascination with wanting to look underneath tree bark, but my inquisitiveness is definitely going to be worth the price, I think, because there's the most amazing things that you can find underneath bark. Obviously a bunch of nocturnal insects will come and take refuge in these spaces and crawl in here. As you can see, they offer a lot of protection, not only from the sun, but also from the rest of the elements, rain and wind even. And you can sometimes find the most bizarre creatures that are underneath these bark things. And so I like to get into the habit of seeing. This particular piece of bark doesn't have too much on it. What we do have though is quite an interesting fungus growing off of this dead tree. Now, contrary to popular belief, it's fungus that is the biggest danger to trees. It's definitely not elephant. What happens is a tree loses a bough or loses a branch through whatever reason, could be weight, wind, elephants, and that exposes the tree and the wood of the tree to the outside world. And this to a tree is almost the same as us getting a cut through our skin. It's a place where fungus can get into the tree and take root. And you probably find that that's exactly what happened with this knobthorn. The elephant came and peeled a section of bark off of it, and some fungus got into it. Now you've got a fungal infection that's killed it. We've got two different types of fungi here. We've got a bracket fungus, which is this one here, and you can see it's quite woody and quite hard. And then you've got this fungus growing out the bottom. I actually don't know what this fungus is, but this fungus is not fungus that you can eat. It's a hard fungus, it's not a soft fungus. But what you can do with this is you can actually strop a knife or a razor the foot trackers or the settlers of the land, the white settlers that came into this area in the 1820s to 1850s used to strop their razor blades on these. And I have stropped a knife before on it. I don't think it does much to sharpen the blade, but it definitely gives it a polish and can definitely give you back your edge if you find it blunted. And that's what you used to use bracket fungi for. Anyway. And they get quite big actually. They get probably about as big as a dinner plate. Alrighty. I am told that Jamie has got some updates for you. So while myself and Brian carry on exploring through here, we're going to send you through to Jamie and see you in a bit.
While you were with Steph, Liam came up with a really good name for our hyena clan. The Djuma hyenas could quite possibly be known as the baby boomers of this particular drought season. They're doing exceptionally well for themselves, this particular clan. The survival rates for their cubs have been, so far, from what I can tell, pretty much 100% since I started working here 6 months ago. And it must be, I'm not sure, I'm never entirely sure where I am in space and time. I'm not entirely sure what the date is, but it must be very close to 6 months ago exactly to the day that I started working here. And what a wondrous 6 months it has been. I'll say a big thank you to all of you for making it the most wondrous experience. Let's go find some wild dogs now. Go see if the Investing Pack has decided to come join us on Boyatella. It was just a report, so we first have to find the tracks wandering across the road. Lisa, of course, we've spoken a lot about the fact that drought time is good for the predators, and you were wondering if it goes the other way around, do predators suffer? And it's a bit more complex than we've been necessarily making it out to be, because drought time, the one big thing that drought does do is it means that there is a spread of disease that happens much faster than during the rainy season. So because the animals are by necessity more compact, what's the word? Concentrated around water sources. Their access to water sources is limited, and there's a limited supply of fresh water. So if there is some kind of outbreak of disease, actually drought is not good for predators. But for the most part, they have much more easy access to food. We've been listening to the Game Drive channel and listening to the Buffelshoek updates, and every 3 days, regular as clockwork, the Talamati pride kills a buffalo. They've done exceptionally well. They've been full since I came back to work 10 days ago. In terms of working the other way around, yes, to an extent. In the rainy season, the predators have to work harder. The animals don't have to move around a water source. They pretty much have access to water wherever they are. The bush becomes dense and green. It becomes a little bit more tricky. And the animals are at full strength, so running away is much easier. They're much healthier. There's also a knock-on effect. So in the next year or so, in my what I guess will happen is the fact that sorry, I got distracted by the Game Drive channel, talking again about the Talamati pride on Buffelshoek. The prey population is going to decrease. The pregnancy rate and the birth rate is going to be lower next year because the females haven't had the same access to nutrients, and they're going to struggle. That in turn is going to knock the prey population down, and when the rains do eventually come, there'll be a slow recovery of that population, but there'll be less prey for the predators, so there'll be less predators. There'll be a lower survival rate for the offspring of predators. It's a more complex knock-on effect than we've necessarily explained, and I haven't worked my way through an extended drought period in the bush yet, so I'm interested to observe and watch the effects over the coming years. The joys of building up experience of years and years worth of time spent in the bush is that maybe you can give slightly more accurate predictions as to what's going to happen. My biggest fear at the moment, apart from us never getting rain, is that we get, I don't know, a quarter of our average annual rainfall in a day. If 100 mils drops in a day now, we are in just as much trouble. At least there'll be underground water to start supplying the boreholes, and there'll be some surface water for the animals, but it's going to do quite serious damage to the remaining vegetation because the grass species, the soil is not ready to absorb that much water. There's going to be serious runoff, therefore erosion. It will make roads impassable, and it will break the walls of dams because it won't be, and I'm a little bit worried that that's what's going to happen. But these are weather patterns that maybe not have been worsened by humans, but there are weather patterns that have repeated themselves years and years over the last, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of years in this area. The ecosystems will recover. It is not all doom and gloom. It just is very difficult for all of us to watch, of course. It's not easy to see animals struggling with dehydration and malnutrition. Where are these wild dogs hiding? Quick update on leopard movements. It seemed as though Karula wandered across Sydney's dam into Buffelshoek. Oh wow, it really does look like it might rain. Please rain. Please rain. A gentle drizzle. Just a gentle drizzle would be so lovely. Ava would like to know if I've ever gotten lost. Yes, Ava, I have. Within the bush, you're never truly completely lost. You always have a vague idea of direction. Cloudy days maybe are a little bit more difficult because It's amazing how quickly you can lose your sense of where north is. But yes, when I first started working as a guide, it was okay during the day, you know, when you've got you could sit with your MacBook like this and you stare fiercely at it. That's one thing, but when you're driving around in the dark, it's very easy to miss one junction, take the wrong junction, and all of a sudden you've got absolutely no idea where it is. My approach to that with guests has been to pretend I know exactly where I'm going. I'm not sure how many guests I've fooled over time, particularly when their game drives have suddenly extended by an hour or so, and all of a sudden we've come home at 8:30 at night. But you learn tricks and little things to help you get by. Out here it's fairly easy. I found learning the roads on Djuma pretty simple. I still get lost on Arathusa. I'm not lost. I'm just not entirely sure exactly where I am or exactly which road I'm on. That's okay, you know, you pick a direction, drive on it, and you hit a landmark. Pretty easy to do. The reserve that I used to work on, we had 2 river systems. So if you picked a direction and went in it and hit a river, you knew where you were. Yes, I have been lost. I've also been lost on foot before. I've popped out on a road and thought, oh, I know exactly where I am, and it turns out to be completely mistaken. The one interesting thing that you learn to do when you're walking, or at least I learned to do, on a cloudy day, it's easy to walk in a straight line on a sunny day, but on a cloudy day, where you're not quite sure exactly of your bearings, your one leg is longer than the other. One leg is more dominant than the other. So, and I'm sure many of you know this, they've done a lot of studies into the fact that if you blindfold a person and send them walking, they will actually do a spiral. Just because one foot takes slightly bigger steps than the other. So you learn to moderate that as a guide, or I did personally. You learn to, because you always approach obstacles, or I did, I'm speaking for myself here, I would always go around the right side of an obstacle, which starts to put you slightly offline. So you learn to go right to the left and right to the left. It's something that you have to learn in time. Otherwise you can definitely wind up not where you were expecting to wind up. And the nice thing about doing the live walks is that you're not really set to go anywhere, if that makes sense. You can just wander through the blocks and enjoy it. But I have done walks before where I've had a set destination in mind and wound up not really where I expected to be. And I'm sure that it is a problem that is not being experienced by Steph at the moment, and I'm sure he knows exactly where he is, but let's go across and find out.
I'd like to take the compliment that Jamie just so gracefully gave me over there, but to be honest with you, it's not completely true. I've been lost quite a few times in the bush. The most noticeable or the most notable one recently was a wilderness trail I was doing in December last year, the year before in actual fact, where I did a 3-hour loop thinking I was walking in a straight line and ended up standing literally 5 steps away from when I started 3 hours before, not believing that I'd got myself completely turned around. It was a revelation, I must be honest with you. Not something that I am proud about, but nevertheless it was interesting to see. Now we came down in this direction. There's a grove here of ancient tamboti trees, and for those of you who are just joining us this morning, good morning, and we are on a mission to find a lunar moth, and these large trees are exactly where we're going to be going. I haven't found lunar moth cocoons under anything else except for large tamboti trees, and this on the entire property is a single grove of large trees. It's the only grove I know of with a collection of large trees like this, and that's why we've come here to come and have a look. Wow, Genevieve in New York, you've asked me a question this morning that's quite in depth for this time of the morning. In which tree here has the largest seed dispersal? while I'm busy walking and thinking, I'd have to say that the largest dispersal of seeds here would be the fungus of all the plants. They make the most spores, literally in their billions, and they really just float around on the breeze, and they cover large areas and would have the largest seed dispersal of any of the plant groups out here. I'm going to say fungus just to play it safe, although I'm sure that's not what you wanted to hear. You wanted to know which tree has, comes out with the most amount of seeds, or the most epic amount of seeds. Let me say that the trees that produce a fruit that mammals enjoy to eat would probably be something closer to what you were looking for, I'm sure. And there you'd have jackalberry, produce a large amount of fruit. You'd have the marula trees, of course, which produce a fruit which everything and everyone loves to eat. And there in turn, you could find elephant, for lack of a better example, eating a marula. He walks, in one day they can walk 50 kilometers away and drop the seed 50 kilometers away from where it was eaten 24 hours before. So I would say that marulas, probably in terms of how far they can get from one point to another before they are dropped and before they become stationary to germinate, would probably be the one with the greatest seed dispersal range that I can think of this quick and at this time of the morning before I've had my second cup of coffee. So thanks for that, Genevieve. All right, so now we're underneath this grove of trees, and I actually want to get us into them so that you can see what I mean by this grove. It's just a collection of really, really big old trees. And the first thing that I notice over here is a feather from a bird that quite obviously relies on camouflage. It's obviously not something with metallic blue feathers like our wonderful woodland kingfisher would be, or iridescent feathers like the starlings, for lack of a better example. This is probably from a nightjar or from a thickney. It looks like the primary flight feather of a nightjar, if I were to guess what this is. That white mark there forms part of a bar on the wings of nightjars. So if I were to be answering a question on what I think this is from, I'd say it's absolutely from a nightjar. And they molt. Birds molt their feathers, and their primary feathers they molt one at a time so that they don't lose the ability to fly. So this is one of their primary feathers. They've molted it off, one of them, and you'll notice when you see birds with molted feathers, especially these primary feathers, when you're seeing them flying in the air, they will be missing one of the feathers on one side of the wing. And what will happen is this feather will grow back, and then the feather just next to it will fall out, and just next to it, and just next to it, and then the other wing will start. One feather will fall out, and then the other one, and then the other one, and so they'll molt their feathers continuously through their life, one feather at a time, so that they don't lose the ability to fly. The only bird that I know of on the planet that molts all of its feathers at the same time is a penguin. And that's because if a penguin had to molt one feather at a time, its waterproofness would be greatly diminished, and therefore its ability to combat cold. And so a penguin molts all of its feathers at the same time. As far as I know, I've never seen a penguin, a bald penguin. I don't recall ever having seen a photograph of one, but it's its primary feathers, and that's what it is. So I'm going to keep this because I'm sure someone at the camp is going to enjoy having a nightjar feather, and we're going to carry on looking for my lunar moth. Now, I'm not actually sure what lunar moth adults feed on, but it would probably be similar to other moths in that it would feed on nectar and pollen and fruit juice and a bunch of other exudes from fruit and from trees. What I'm looking for is a fresh lunar moth, a lunar moth that has come out of its cocoon last night, and he's just waiting for the sun to warm it up before it decides to do its thing. And I'm looking for a profile, almost like a boomerang, Perry good morning, Perry, in New York, probably good evening to you actually, since you're much further behind than what we are, has asked me, what does the lunar moth caterpillar look like? I don't actually know, to be quite honest, Perry. I started to look at the Tamboti trees very early on in the season with a specific mission of trying to actually see what one of these caterpillars look, and to date I still haven't found a lunar moth caterpillar or any caterpillar on a Tamboti tree, and it's not for lack of me sticking my face into these trees, I can tell you. I also haven't found this season any fresh cocoons from, I don't know if it's just whether or not the moths lay their eggs early on in the season, and then the worms or the caterpillars take a long time to get big and then only pupate at the end of the season. I'm going to only be able to tell you that at the end of the season, when I find a moth, when I find a caterpillar, and when I find a fresh cocoon from the season. So far I've only found a moth, and it was in a wood pile, and I haven't found any worms or anything like that. Alright, let's carry on a little bit deeper into this grove. Tambotis being very rare, these groves tend to be quite small, and although we're standing in the largest grove of big trees that I know of, it literally just extends as far as what you can see right now, which is quite sad. They were harvested very heavily for their wood for close on 200 or 300 years, and the unfortunate thing was that they don't grow back very quickly. They're incredibly slow growing trees. You're looking at Tamboti trees growing for 600, 700, 800 years before they get to this size. You can imagine, without understanding much about these trees, in a very, very short space of time, you can actually completely ruin a population. Isn't this lovely? Well, look at this. For those of you who live close to nature, you'll understand the significance of having a thicket like we have at the moment of the same trees. The Tamboti trees, for those of you who have just joined us, are these trees with a very dark, almost black bark, with the stacks of roughly rectangular chunks of bark on them, and they all tend to have these very straight limbs. And they all tend to have a sacrificial limb as well. I've heard reference to this thing over my entire career, and although there are certain theories as to what a sacrificial limb is in a tree, I haven't heard any conclusive evidence. As far as I understand, a sacrificial limb is a tree as the theory goes anyway, the tree will push all of its toxins, basically what our liver would do, into a branch which would kill that branch, and then that's the way the tree stays healthy. But like I said, I haven't really heard anything. You do find it, you find it in fig trees, you find it in fever trees, and you find it in Tamboti trees, and for the life of me I can't actually explain the exact reason as to why. But the sacrificial limb theory to me works out fine. You can actually see in that tree there, you can see some nice examples of sacrificial limb theory at work. You can see that although the tree seems healthy, there are definitely some boughs there that are dead, and only the heartwood left. We're going to carry on ambling through this thicket. Jamie's got an update for you. We'll catch you later.
At the moment, no signs so far of the wild dogs coming through. Apparently they were around Zoe's Road and main access, but I haven't picked up on any tracks at the moment. Still keeping a firm eye out. Interesting, one thing I've observed as I've been driving along is how quiet it is out here, just in terms of general game. And I think this weather sort of sends them scurrying into the thickest bush they can find. A combination of the wind and the clouds, they look for places to stay, to hide away in. And as I said, it's perfect hunting weather. for the various predators out here. So I think they probably spent quite a scary night last night. I noticed it with Lexi, my dog, who's come to visit, and she was very, very on edge last night. Yesterday afternoon and last night, just because of the constant wind, was making her incredibly nervous and jumpy. So it's interesting to see that behavior come through even in domestic animals. So Roy, you've actually asked a very perceptive question, and that's whether anybody tracks the position of the animals and map it in order to get an idea of movements whenever sightings are called in. Sorry, I got distracted. I was looking at tracks, but I don't think it's anything exciting. Roy, yes, there are different organizations that do. We work with Panthera. So Panthera is a big cat research project, but that actually doesn't just, in this particular case, monitor big cats. So every time we have a sighting with, for example, a leopard, cheetah, wild dog, and brown hornbill, we will put that data through onto their computer, and they will collect that on a regular basis and use it on one of the types of mapping software. The one that I used to use when I did this type of work was Quantum GIS or ArcView-GIS, and you can essentially create the most incredible maps. And something that I used to do in the area that I worked in was you can layer up different positions, different times of year, and you can really start to build up a comprehensive idea as to what the animals are doing. But generally, that research is focused on the endangered species and the big cats. Oh, there we go. This is where the general game is hiding. And I'm hoping that by stopping here, they're actually going to slowly wander in our direction. Look at that beautiful kudu. Young female. Very striking. Oh, one got left behind. You can see that tail curled up to expose the white underneath. And, oh, here comes another one. See how clearly that flash of white stands out as they dash past. Followed shortly by a herd of zebra. Good morning, zebbies. Interestingly, looks like a sub-adult leading the group, wandering past. That one's still very young. Definitely one of the most picturesque animals. And there, that is one, the lady at the back, now on our left, is fairly pregnant. And she's going to disappear behind the bush in a moment. These zebra really are incredibly striking. And we only get the plain zebra species here. And Sammy, you wanted to know what the biggest difference between the mountain zebra and the plain zebra is. The one that you're always taught as a child growing up in South Africa is that plain zebra, or as I used to know them, Burchell zebra, have those shadow stripes. So you see those faint stripes on this one's sort of rear end and hips, in between the black stripes. Those are known as shadow stripes. The mountain zebra do not have them. The other big difference is that in mountain zebra, the stripes do not extend all the way down the legs. They stop about halfway, and they do not extend right down under the stomach. So those are the biggest difference. In a way, if I'm completely honest, I think that mountain zebra are actually prettier. They look neater somehow. They look, I don't know, it might also be the tendency of our plain zebra to have dust baths, although mountain zebra do it as well. Maybe it's just the absence of the shadow stripes in between the big, bold black stripes. But That is the most significant difference. If you bear with me one moment, Sammy, I'm actually going to find a nice picture for you so that I can show you. Hoping there'll be a clear picture. One very round belly. Zebra always look slightly bloated, and that's because of their digestive system, but I think she's pregnant as well. Just judging by the way she's bulging at the sides, I think that's a pregnancy in there as well. Sure. And one having a scratch over the tree. And quite often you see the poor trees slightly bent over sideways. I've actually just moved one off the road earlier, and that's from not necessarily just elephants, but also animals like zebra and giraffe coming and placing the tree sort of between their front legs. So Sammy's question, this is a mountain zebra. It's not the clearest picture. In my experience, they generally don't have stripes extending all the way down to their feet, but that depends on the individual, because we've seen some plain zebra as well with unique looking stripe patterns and without the stripes all the way down on the feet. As you can see, there's no shadow striping, and that's the biggest thing in between the black stripes. They actually look fairly neat, and then the stripes stop and do not extend all the way down the stomach and underneath it in the same way it does with plain zebra. And then if we look at this picture of the plain zebra here, maybe not the clearest diagram, but you can see the shadow stripes in between the dark stripes. You can't really see it, but the stripes extend all the way down under the stomach. But you do get certain plain zebra with hardly any stripes moving up their legs or around their rear end. And that's actually what scientists and evolutionary biologists believe gave rise to what they now know was a subspecies of plain zebra, the quagga. Quagga, I think. Don't think there's a U in there. Quagga. I think it's just QA. Either way, it is an animal that looked almost like a half zebra, half horse. And that's originally, in its own way, what it was thought to be. It is now unfortunately extinct. It has been hunted to extinction long before our time. But it's something that now human beings are trying to recreate in a special quagga breeding center. So they're trying to select artificially for those characteristics. So Nisa, who's watching in Wisconsin, we saw that incredibly pregnant female. Our zebras have moved off, but we've still got a little bit of a view of them, so I'll try and get you a nice look at her before she moves off. Lisa, zebra do breed throughout the year, but as with every animal, there is a peak around this season. So yes, we're seeing lots more babies at the moment. She looks like she's going to pop fairly soon, the one that we were looking at. The stallions left her behind. We're seeing more and more foals born at this time of year. Usually that would be ideal for the animals out here because it's the rainy season, in theory. So they should have more access to nutrients. But sitting looking at this clearing, now this clearing should have grass that is as tall as me, or close to as tall as me, and thick and green. And the reason I say that is that we're sitting right on a seep line, so there's plenty of underground water, or there should be plenty of underground water flowing through. Unfortunately, at the moment, this is what the animals are having to contend with. It looks much like it did in midwinter, in the driest part of the season. It's essentially just forbs and some patches of the hardier grass species. Now for zebra, they can actually bulk graze. So they generally, bulk grazers, so hindgut fermenters, are capable of utilizing the poorer species of grass. So they can just bulk graze as much as necessary to get the nutrients, and their digestive systems will cope with that. Ruminants tend to prefer slightly nicer grass, so something like the kudu that we're looking at. They prefer access to the more nutritious species, but they also digest more effectively. And we're looking at the zebra on the left with one stomach and most of the digestion happening in the intestines, and then the kudu that ruminate and have 4 stomachs. Oh, got a fright. Did the zebra scare you? Immediately dashing for cover. Those silvery leaves that we're looking at now that make the biggest impression, that is how I know that we're sitting on a drainage line. Those are silver cluster leaf trees. They're beautiful trees. You can see why they're called silver cluster leaves, because they do take on an almost grey colour in comparison to everything else. And they are trees that grow on seep lines. And what a seep line is essentially underneath the soil layer is a solid rock layer that pushes the groundwater that's flowing through it onto the surface. And that's why I say this clearing should have significantly more plant life. Unfortunately, there's just not been enough rain and enough water flowing through to get the environment to look the way that it should. Animals are disappearing into the silver cluster leaf forest, and I'm still trying to figure out where these wild dogs might have been. While I do that, let's pop over to Steph and see what he's been up to.